Every August for 30 years, the Riverside County Fair brought families together for cotton candy, carnival rides, and the annual talent show. But on August 12th, 2001, 12 young performers took the stage for the evening competition and were never seen again. No witnesses saw them leave. No families picked them up. No trace was found until 2024, when demolition crews preparing to renovate the old fairgrounds discovered something beneath the main stage, an underground facility that had been sealed for over 2 decades. Before we uncover this mystery, make sure to subscribe because we dig deep into the stories that communities tried to forget. The summer of 2001 was hot and humid in Riverside County, Illinois. Corn stood tall in the surrounding fields, and the annual county fair had drawn its usual crowd of families, teenagers, and local vendors. The fairgrounds buzzed with activity as August 12th marked the final night of the week-long celebration. The talent show had been a tradition since 1971. Every year, local kids aged 8 to 16 would compete for ribbons and small cash prizes. Parents filled the wooden bleachers, grandparents brought lawn chairs, and the whole community gathered around the outdoor stage that had been built behind the main exhibition hall. This year, 12 young performers had made it to the final night. There was Emma Martinez, 14, who played violin like she'd been born with a bow in her hand. Michael Chen, 11, could juggle 5 balls while riding a unicycle. The youngest was 7-year-old Katie Morrison, who sang with a voice that made grown men cry. At 7:30 p.m., families began arriving. The parking area filled with pickup trucks and minivans. Folding chairs were arranged in neat rows. The smell of funnel cake and caramel apples drifted from nearby vendors. It felt like every other August night in Riverside County. Safe, familiar, predictable. Behind the stage, 12 nervous kids adjusted costumes and practiced their routines one last time. The performance area was a simple setup. A wooden platform elevated 4 feet off the ground, with curtains hung on metal frames for privacy. Parents weren't allowed backstage during the show. That was the rule, performers only. Fair coordinator Susan Walsh checked her clipboard for the final time. She'd been organizing the talent show for 8 years, and every detail was planned to the minute. Each act got exactly 6 minutes, no exceptions. With 12 performers, the show would run from 8 p.m. to 9:45 p.m., followed by judging and awards. Places everyone, Susan called out at 7:55 p.m. The kids lined up in performance order, their excitement mixing with pre-show jitters. At exactly 8 p.m., Mayor Robert Chen took the microphone. "Welcome to the 31st Annual Riverside County Fair Talent Show." His voice boomed across the grounds. "Let's hear it for our amazing young performers." The crowd applauded as Emma Martinez walked onto the stage, violin in hand. For the next hour and 45 minutes, the 12 children showcased their talents. Each performance was met with enthusiastic cheers from proud families and neighbors. Katie Morrison, the 7-year-old singer, closed the show at 9:45 p.m. with a rendition of Amazing Grace that left the audience in respectful silence. She curtsied, waved to her parents in the front row, and disappeared behind the curtain to join the other performers. "Thank you, everyone," Mayor Chen announced. "The judges will now deliberate. Please give us 15 minutes and we'll announce our winners." Parents began chatting among themselves. Kids ran toward the midway games, and vendors started their evening cleanup. Everything was normal. Everything was routine. At 10 p.m., Susan Walsh returned to the stage to announce the winners. But when she went backstage to gather the performers, she found empty space. No children, no costumes, no instruments. Just 12 metal folding chairs arranged in a circle, and a note taped to the back curtain that read, "The show must go on." Susan's first thought was that the kids were playing a prank. Maybe they'd gone to get snacks or use the restroom. She called out their names. No response. She checked behind the exhibition hall, near the livestock barns, around the game booths. Nothing. By 10:15 p.m., panic had spread through the crowd. Parents were searching frantically, calling their children's names. Fair volunteers checked every building, every ride, every vendor stall. The kids had simply vanished. Mayor Chen grabbed the microphone. "We need everyone to help us look for our performers. They may have wandered off. Let's spread out and search the ground systematically." But as the minutes turned to hours, it became clear that 12 children hadn't just wandered off. They had disappeared completely. Sheriff Tom Bradley arrived at 10:45 p.m. He'd been enjoying a quiet Saturday evening at home when the call came in. Missing children at the county fair. In 32 years of law enforcement, he'd never dealt with anything like this. How many witnesses saw them go backstage after the show? Sheriff Bradley asked Susan Walsh. I did, she said. I watched Katie Morrison walk behind the curtain. That was the last time anyone saw any of them. And how long before you went back there? 15 minutes, maybe less. Sheriff Bradley examined the backstage area. The space was small, maybe 20 feet by 30 feet, enclosed on three sides by the exhibition hall and open to the rear. There was nowhere to hide, nowhere to go except back toward the crowd or out into the open field behind the fairgrounds. Any other exits? He asked. Just that way, Susan pointed toward the field. But you'd have to walk across 50 yards of open ground. Someone would have seen them. Sheriff Bradley walked to the edge of the field. A few festival lights cast dim illumination, but beyond that was darkness. In the distance, corn stalks swayed in the evening breeze. If someone had taken the children, they could have disappeared into those fields and been miles away before anyone noticed. But 12 children? How do you move 12 children without anyone seeing? The search expanded immediately. Sheriff Bradley called in deputies from 3 surrounding counties. They brought dogs, flashlights, and volunteers. By midnight, nearly 200 people were combing the fairgrounds and surrounding farmland. The search continued until dawn. Dogs picked up scent trails that led nowhere. Flashlights swept through corn rows and examined every barn, shed, and outbuilding within 5 miles. Volunteers checked abandoned houses, old silos, and even the county's storm drains. Nothing. The FBI arrived on Sunday morning. Special Agent Lisa Parker had worked missing children cases for 12 years, but she'd never seen anything like this. 12 children vanishing simultaneously from a public event with hundreds of witnesses was unprecedented. We're treating this as an abduction, Agent Parker told assembled media. We believe the children were taken by someone familiar with the fairgrounds and the surrounding area. The investigation revealed troubling details. The talent show had been publicized for weeks in advance. Performance schedules had been posted online. Anyone could have known exactly when the children would be isolated backstage. More disturbing was the discovery that the backstage area had no security cameras. The fair's surveillance system covered the midway and main gates, but not the performance area. The oversight seemed almost deliberate. Agent Parker interviewed every fair employee, every vendor, every volunteer. Background checks were run on anyone with access to the fairgrounds. The investigation expanded to include sex offenders within a 100-mile radius. But as days turned to weeks, leads dried up. No ransom demands were made. No bodies were found. No witnesses came forward with useful information. The 12 children had simply evaporated. The case dominated local news for months. Parents organized search parties, vigils, and reward funds. Photos of the missing children appeared on milk cartons and highway billboards. But as autumn turned to winter, hope began to fade along with the media attention. The Riverside County Fair Board made a difficult decision in 2002. The annual fair would continue, but there would be no more talent shows. The stage was dismantled, and the area was converted to additional vendor space. For 23 years, the case remained cold. Families moved away or learned to live with the permanent ache of uncertainty. Sheriff Bradley retired in 2019, the case file still open on his desk. Agent Parker moved to other assignments, but kept photos of the 12 children pinned to her office wall. Then in March 2024, the Riverside County Commission announced plans to modernize the fairgrounds. The old exhibition hall would be demolished and replaced with a climate-controlled facility. The project would require extensive excavation to install new utility lines and foundations. Jake Phillips had been operating heavy machinery for 23 years. He'd cleared land for shopping centers, dug foundations for office buildings, and excavated countless construction sites. But on March 15, 2024, his excavator blade hit something unexpected beneath the old fairgrounds. "Tom, come look at this," Jake called to his foreman, shutting off the diesel engine. Tom Vasquez walked over to examine what Jake had uncovered. Beneath 3 feet of soil and gravel was a concrete slab. It looked too uniform to be natural, too deliberate to be accidental. That's not on any of the site plans, Tom said, checking his blueprints. Call the county office. We need to know what's down there before we go any further. The county sent an inspector who recommended bringing in ground-penetrating radar. The scan revealed a large underground structure directly beneath where the old talent show stage had been located. Sheriff Bradley's replacement, Sheriff Maria Gonzalez, received the call that afternoon. She'd heard about the 2001 case from her predecessor, but she'd never expected it to resurface, literally. We need to excavate carefully, she told the construction crew. This might be evidence in an active investigation. The excavation took 3 days. Working with archaeological precision, crews slowly revealed a concrete stairway leading down to a sealed metal door. The structure had been professionally built, reinforced with steel beams, and designed to remain hidden for decades. When they finally opened the door, Sheriff Gonzalez found herself staring into a nightmare. The underground facility was larger than anyone had imagined. A main corridor led to multiple rooms, each one designed for a specific purpose. There was a sleeping area with 12 small beds, a classroom with desks and educational materials, a dining area with tables and chairs, even a small medical facility with examination equipment. But it was the performance room that made Sheriff Gonzalez's blood run cold. It was an exact replica of the fairgrounds stage, complete with curtains, lights, and seating for an audience. On the walls were dozens of photographs showing children performing, singing, dancing, playing instruments. Jesus Christ, whispered Detective Raymond Torres, Sheriff Gonzalez's lead investigator. This was built for them. This was planned. In the sleeping area, they found personal belongings that matched descriptions from the 2001 case files. Emma Martinez's violin case, Michael Chen's juggling balls, Katie Morrison's lucky hairbrush. Items that should have been lost forever, preserved like artifacts in a tomb. But there were no bodies, no children, no explanation of what had happened after they'd been brought to this underground prison. The discovery made national news within hours. CNN, Fox News, and every major network sent crews to Riverside County. The sleepy farming community found itself at the center of a media circus that dwarfed the original investigation. FBI Special Agent Sarah Chen arrived to coordinate the federal response. Advanced forensic teams swept every inch of the facility, collecting DNA evidence, fingerprints, and any clues that might explain what had happened 23 years earlier. This was a sophisticated operation, Agent Chen told reporters. The construction alone would have required significant planning, funding, and expertise. We're looking at months, possibly years of preparation. The facility's construction had been expertly concealed. Access was gained through a hidden entrance disguised as a utility shed near the exhibition hall. The underground complex had its own ventilation system, power supply, and water access tapped from the fairgrounds' main lines. Most disturbing was evidence that the facility had been occupied for an extended period. Food storage areas contained expired supplies dating from 2001 to 2004. Educational materials suggested the children had been held for at least 3 years, possibly longer. We believe the 12 children were kept here against their will, Agent Chen explained during a press briefing, but at some point, they were moved to another location or... She didn't finish the sentence. The investigation focused on identifying who had built the facility. Construction records from the 1990s were examined. County permits were reviewed. Anyone with access to heavy machinery and construction expertise became a person of interest. The breakthrough came from an unexpected source. Walter Kowalski, now 78 and living in a nursing home, called the FBI tip line after seeing news coverage. I remember that job, he told Agent Chen during an interview. Summer of 1999. Guy paid cash to have me dig out a basement behind the fairgrounds. Said it was for storm shelter storage. Walter's memory was fuzzy on details, but he remembered the client was a man in his 50s who claimed to work for the county. He had official-looking paperwork and permits that appeared legitimate. What was his name? Agent Chen asked. Davis, I think. Maybe Davidson. He drove a white pickup truck and never talked much. Paid me $5,000 cash when the job was done. DMV records from 1999 showed 3 men named Davis or Davidson who owned white pickup trucks in the county. 2 were easily eliminated through background checks and alibis. The third, Richard Davis, had no current address and hadn't renewed his license since 2001. Richard Davis became the prime suspect, but tracking him proved impossible. The name appeared to be an alias. The address he'd given Walter was a vacant lot. Even the social security number on his construction permits belonged to a man who had died in 1987. Richard Davis is a ghost, Agent Chen told the investigative team, but he was real enough to build this facility and carry out a plan that took years to execute. The search for the 12 children expanded to include databases of unidentified remains across the country. DNA samples from personal belongings were compared to cold cases nationwide. Age progression photos were created showing what the children might look like as adults. Some families began receiving mysterious phone calls, voices claiming to be their missing children, now adults living under new identities. Most were cruel hoaxes, but a few contained details that only the real children would have known. Linda Martinez answered her phone one Tuesday evening to hear a woman's voice say, "Mom, it's Emma. I'm okay, I can't come home, but I want you to know I'm alive." The call lasted 8 seconds. It couldn't be traced. Voice analysis was inconclusive, but Linda heard something in those words that convinced her, for the first time in 23 years, that her daughter might still be alive. Similar calls came to other families. Always brief, always untraceable, always containing just enough personal information to be believable, but never enough proof to convince law enforcement. Agent Chen remained skeptical. "Someone is playing psychological games with these families," she told Sheriff Gonzalez. "Whether it's the perpetrator or someone else, we can't determine. But false hope can be as cruel as no hope at all." The underground facility was sealed after the investigation concluded. Too dangerous to leave open, too expensive to demolish, it became a buried monument to 12 lost childhoods. The Riverside County Fair continued without its talent show. The new exhibition hall was built over the site, with plaques commemorating the 12 young performers who had vanished that August night. Their names were etched in bronze, preserved in a way their lives had not been. But questions remained. What had happened to the children after 2004? Were they still alive somewhere, living secret lives they couldn't discuss? Had they been moved to another facility, another underground prison in another town? The case inspired new legislation requiring background checks for all fair employees and volunteers. Security cameras became mandatory at public events involving children. The Riverside Protocol was adopted by counties across the Midwest. Sheriff Gonzalez kept the case file open, though active leads had been exhausted. Her office received occasional tips, reports of sightings, theories from amateur investigators. Most led nowhere, but she followed up on each one, hoping for the breakthrough that would finally bring closure to 12 families. Jake Phillips, the construction worker who had made the discovery, became an unlikely advocate for missing children. He spoke at schools about safety, testified before state legislators about protecting vulnerable populations, and personally visited each family to offer support. "I was just digging a foundation," he told reporters, "but I found something that 12 families needed to see, even if it wasn't what they wanted to find." The underground facility had been Jake's accidental discovery, but it proved that the 12 children hadn't simply vanished into thin air. They had been taken, held, and possibly moved or worse, but for the first time in 23 years, families had answers, even if those answers only led to bigger questions. The story of the Riverside County Fair spread far beyond Illinois. It became a cautionary tale about how quickly innocence can turn to horror, how easily children can disappear, and how long communities can carry the weight of unsolved tragedy. Parents across the country looked at their own local fairs, school events, and community gatherings with new suspicion. Children learned to stay close to adults, to never go anywhere alone, to understand that danger can hide behind familiar faces and trusted institutions. But perhaps the most lasting impact was simpler. The reminder that missing doesn't mean gone, that cold cases can warm again, and that sometimes the most important discoveries happen when we're just trying to build something new on ground that holds old secrets. The talent show stage where 12 children last performed was gone, replaced by concrete and steel, but their voices still echoed in the memories of those who had watched them sing, dance, and dream of futures that would never come. Somewhere, perhaps, 12 people carry memories of underground rooms and stolen childhoods, of performances given for audiences that should never have existed, of dreams deferred but not destroyed. Or perhaps they exist only in the preserved spaces of a buried facility, in the hearts of families who refuse to stop hoping, and in the questions that may never find answers. The show, as the note had promised, went on. But it was a different kind of performance now, one where communities learned to watch more carefully, love more fiercely, and never take for granted the simple act of children coming home after the final bow. Subscribe for more stories about mysteries hidden beneath the surface, because some secrets are buried so deep that only accident can bring them to light.